Set your soul on fire with me, Sonia from Inner Balance. Hello, 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 and welcome to a very special edition of Set Your Soul on Fire. I'm on location yet again. And do you know what? They always say never work with kids or animals, and here I am in a horse yard, surrounded by horses, so the background noise is going to be uncontrollable, but I'm here for it, and I'm so excited for this conversation. This has been a long time coming, and I am joined today with my very, very good friend, Jennifer Torrens. Jenny, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for inviting me into your yard. It is an unusual spot to do a podcast, but I really wanted to get this conversation running with you because we have known each other for a long time. I've watched you grow up, but really excited to get the conversation going. How are you feeling?
I'm good. A bit nervous, but
It's okay. We are surrounded by the most beautiful animals. There's also a cat wandering about here. I'm absolutely loving this set. I'm all for this. I think maybe all my podcasts need to be in random locations. So let's dive into this. So for those that don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself and walk us through a typical day in the life.
well, my yard here is in Drumquin, just about 15, 20 minutes outside of Oma. It's very much a family-run business. I got into horses through, both my family. Mum show jumped, and Dad was a racehorse trainer. And I started out in ponies. I suppose I was riding before I could walk, nearly before anything. I was always so eager when I was a child. I've always had a passion and a love for them, and school was never really my thing, so I left school early and decided I would start out on my own, and it kind of kicked off from there about 4 years ago now. So one road led to another, and here I am today.
So full-time at horses.
Yeah.
And as you say, riding before you could walk. Do you remember the instant or the moment that you fell in love with horses?
I can remember when I was a little small kid, I always wanted to go fast or do something that probably my little small legs or as far as I could reach, but that's always been me. I'm always trying to reach a little bit further than what I should be, but I suppose that's how you get on. It's how you try and make it in this lifestyle. But when I was younger, I remember Dad, he was training at the time, and there was a little grey horse in the yard called List, and he put me up on him. I think I was about 5 or 6, and I had my racing goggles on, and I just thought I was class. And that was the day that I knew this was what I really wanted to do. And I was brought up through the showing world, so and then I had a couple of really, really good show ponies, and they took me all over Ireland and the Royal Highland, and then I started to jump and work in hunters, and I had some amazing working hunter ponies. I'd one, she was called Art Fry Bailey's, and she won Dublin, and it was just the thrill of the sport, like getting into the bigger rings and the bigger stage, the nerve wracking and the adrenaline rush when you go in through that ring of what's going to happen. I think that's what really got me into it more than anything. It was like an adrenaline.
That competitive age. I think I've known you. I've watched you grow up. You have that in your blood. You know, it's nearly in your cup of tea in the morning. But when did you did so many things as a young kid. Now you're mostly show jumping, isn't that right?
Yeah.
But you've dabbled in all parts of the sport, apart from maybe a little bit of eventing.
Yeah, I've never done eventing, but I did do racing. I did racing for 2 years. I rode back to Bataan and Ascan. Dad had them. Ascan, she was kind of the legend of the yard. She was one of those that you knew when you went out on her, she was going to bring you home. And then I went to Gordon Elliott's for a while, and I spent a season there, and then things got really busy at home, and I came back home, and that's when it really kicked off then into show jumping. I tried to juggle the two together, but I just had to set my mind set firmly on one thing, and it was the show jumping. And I was very lucky at that time. I had really good owners, and they backed me, and that's how it all kicked off then with the business on its own, really.
Yeah, because you've moved into, we're going to dive into this a bit more after, but you've moved into running your own business, which is massive at the young little age of 22. So it's really impressive. And it is that finding the balance and finding the thing that you need to, I suppose, become your niche. You know, you were moving between the racing and you were moving into show jumping, knuckling into one area had to happen for you to actually really grow as a rider. But that adaptability that you learned through all of those other things, you know, has stood you, has stood you well. With horses, life, well, horses are all consuming. We know that. And it's really rewarding. But what does a good day look like for you with the horses?
I suppose a good day is when everything runs smoothly. With horses, there can be everything through at you in a day, but I suppose when you get up in the morning and they're all healthy and they all go good and you come back in of every one of them and you're happy, although you'd be happy anyways, and I don't think they could ever not make you happy. But good day is when you're rewarded with success, when you go out to competitions at the weekend, and they have their own wee ways of rewarding you, but sometimes it just can be that bit nicer when you get the success along with it.
Well, that's the thing, you know, horses are the greatest leveler, and not every day is a Rosette winning day. I mean, sometimes it's all about just a good day's their progression, you know, that you can see the growth in their learning. And I know that you do a lot of work with young stock up to Grand Prix level, and that takes patience, I think, probably more than anything, and understanding that every day isn't going to be a good day. Do you think that a little bit of your heart is probably still in the racing, though? Because as a kid, you wanted to go fast all the time. Do you still have that, you know, or have you fully settled yourself into the show jumping world?
I still have a love and a passion for the racing. Like all the bigger meetings, I wouldn't miss it for the world to watch them, and I'd still, like, if it was on TV, I'd be looking at my phone to see the results, and I still have that following off it. But I think my heart fully lies in the show jumping now. Like, I want to try and go on and do bigger things and try and reach goals that I've set out, and that's kind of where these lot have taken me so far, and it's going to plan so far anyways.
Well, you had a fantastic year this year, and like at the start of the season, you travelled to Spain.
Yes.
To the Sunshine Tour, which is a massive thing, because we all kind of, as equestrians, it's that little pinnacle that you get to, like going to Dublin. You know, it's the little thing that you can go and achieve. What was that like? Talk me through Spain.
I mean, Spain was amazing. It was an experience of a lifetime. I was very, very lucky that Clem took me under his wing 3 years ago now. I trained with him with Cool Garçon. He had just come back into work, and I was training with Clem, and he had a very good year as a 7-year-old, and we had some really good results. And then I was surprised on Christmas to go to Spain. So I suppose the build up and everything towards it was something that it's like getting you have to be so fit, and they have to be so fit, and in the training and the travelling them out there, like it's nerve wracking, because you're not sure about every stop. You're hoping that they travel well and they get over there fine and everybody's fine and get settled in, and then you have the other thing, you're out there on your own, like you're looking after them, they're looking after you, and you then become a part of a team. And being a part of a team is very important when you go out there, because you and your horse is teammates. So I suppose I learnt a lot about growing up when I went to Spain. I had to fend for myself. I had to fight that little bit harder to get into the results, because it's so competitive when you go abroad. You're against some of the best riders in the world. And then it's the work that comes along with it. Like it's hard work, but you get rewarded with the success at the end of the day then.
And the sense of achievement from getting to go and do it, and as you say, the growing up that you did, you know, and as a rider and as a person, because you say you had to stand on your own 2 feet. You know, you can have all the support at home and things, but if you go into a different place, and I obviously know the journey, and it was long days, hard work, but it was lots of rewards, and it was great to see. But for me, watching from the sidelines all year, it really was like that leg up for the rest of your season, and you had a fantastic season with the horses. Talk us through some of the successes this year.
I was very lucky that my dad bought a lovely 4-year-old horse there called Pereira. He had a phenomenal season. I always knew he was going to be quite special, but they have to go and do that. We took him to Barnadown, the Breeders' Classic show, and he picked up a couple of really nice placings, and then he was in the top 6 in the big 4-year-old final. He then won then in September Cavan, and then we brought him back for November Cavan, and he was very good there too. Cool Garçon, who I had in Spain, he came home and he grew a lot from the trip to Spain, and we're more thinking on this year for him more than anything to step up to the bigger level again. And then I had a really, really fun mare. She was called Camilo Gano. She was really fun. She was just one of those.
She was spicy.
Yeah.
For the listeners, she was the most spicy little mare.
But she was really fun. You knew when she went in through that ring that she was going to give you her heart. She wore her heart on her sleeve every time you sat on her. But she was awesome. I had some really nice other younger horses for all our clients, and then a couple of horses got sold on. So,
and that's the nature of the business, isn't
is.
it? You know, you can't get too attached. I mean, I have some firm favourites in this yard, and we are sat outside their stables right now, and that is Cool Garçon and Theo, as I know. And they're two handsome boys. But yes, and now we're kicking the door. He's like, I'm here, pay attention to me. But you're clearly dedicated to this, and you have to be. It's your business. And you also have to have the love and the passion. But as with anything that is worth having in this life, it comes with challenges and lessons and things to learn from. And I want to dive into that today because we've known each other a long time, but we're practically family, and I've seen all the ups and downs, but you were a great supporter of mine when I started the Irish Equestrian Mental Health Project, and that project was really close to my heart because it was all around mental health in the sport, and it was something that hadn't been... I'm telling you, all these horses are deciding to make all the noise in the world. But we keep moving forward. There wasn't a lot of talk around mental health in equestrian sports when I started the project. How have you managed like the pressures, like the highs and lows that come from competing at a high level? For those that don't know, like Jenny is competing up to what, 145?
140.
140. So how do you manage the pressures?
Every day is different. There's some days that you can have really good days, and there's some days that you can have bad days. But there was a way, a client of mine, Harry Marshall, taught me that take the bad days is an even bigger learning curve than the good days. Because in the bad days, you learn that little more about your horse, that you need to change something, or you have to go back and do a bit more homework. And that's how I managed to get through the bad days. Although it did get to a stage where sometimes the bad days would have hit me a little bit harder than what they should have. And when the good days end, there wasn't that thrill out of it than what there should have been. But it was those kind of people around me that made me strong. And my granny always told me when I was younger, one day at a time. And that's what I started doing, and that's kind of the way that I take it at the minute.
I think it's the only way that we can do it, especially in a high-performance sport. It comes with lots of pressure, but as does life. And it's taken, your granny's a very wise lady, but it's that one day at a time, and try and improve by 1% each time that we try and do something. You talked there about some days being a bit harder. Can I ask you to talk about that a little bit more?
I suppose it was it was one day I was in Cavan, things weren't going to plan. I wasn't riding to the ability that I probably should have been riding to, and it was a weekend show, and the whole show was just a disaster, and it hit me harder than what a normal bad day would have hit me harder. At the end of the show ended up really well. I got a win out of it, but it was then that I realised that it is quite a leveling sport. And I come home and I was thinking to myself, I'm never going to make it in this. What am I doing?
So that self-doubt started to creep in.
Yeah.
Okay. The inner critic.
There was all that as you say, self-doubt, and it was like, I'm never going to do this. Like, I should just give this up. There's so many people to compete with. There's so many other owners could take them to bigger and better yards, and all that started to like creep up on me, and that's when it all hit me. And I did struggle. I struggled with it quite hardly. I kept it to myself for a long time, and it took me a while to be able to I had at nights I'd come into the house and I just would have went down to my room on my own. I wouldn't have spoke to my mum or my dad.
So you shut yourself off.
Yeah. And it was about a month of it, and I was at another show and it was the same thing. The performance wasn't good, and I sat at the back of the lorry at the tail ramp, and I was just sat there debating to myself, like, I'm just going to give this all up. And it was Mum, she came round to me and she was like, what's going on? And it was at that moment where I kind of had to realise to myself, you need to speak about this. So I told Mum, and the minute that I actually had spoke to somebody, it was like a weight had just lifted off my shoulders. And she sat me down. She was like, that's okay. We'll take a step back. We'll regroup. We'll get everybody on the right track again, and we'll just take it one day at a time.
And it's finding the courage to say that you're struggling first and foremost. Like, I have been open about my own struggles before, but it's not easy. And I think as a young female in the sport, it's also a bit more challenging.
Yeah, I suppose you could say that it's everything. There is the argument that everything's a very male-dominated sport, no matter what you do, if it comes to farming or doing horses. But trying to make, like everybody would say, males are stronger than females, but I believe you're only as strong as you set yourself up to be.
Well, the thing with equestrian sports is, and I don't know if you know this, is that actually over 70% of the industry are female, right? But how masculine is the energy in the sport?
It can be toxic.
Yeah, it can be toxic, and it's the only sport where women have to compete on the same playing field as man.
Yeah.
And like, this isn't to, it's not to be all like feminist or anything like that, but it's having an awareness that is the truth in the sport. There's over 70% of the sport are female, but it's a male-dominated energy. How have you navigated that, in the industry? What challenges have you faced?
I suppose when you look at the start list when it comes out in SGI Live, you're going down through it thinking, gosh, I'm never going to manage to get myself into a placing in this. But Clem, it was one of the things that Clem drilled into my head in Spain was you got to have that fight, and you got to have that fire in your belly, and you just got to go in there and say, I'm going to win this.
It's owning your skill set.
Yeah.
And I suppose having struggled, which is totally normal, with the self-doubt. That's Fred, OG, in the background there. Having struggled with the self-doubt, trying to find that fire in your belly sometimes can be a wee bit hard, but you've put the right support system around you, like Clem and your mum and dad and stuff, to help boost that. But it's knowing what you bring as a rider. And what other things have you done to try and strengthen your own belief in yourself?
I train hard. I do it 7 days a week. I try to go to the best shows. And I just surround myself with really positive people. Like, no matter the results, everyone's saying it's a good day. And I suppose that's the most important thing, is the people who you have around you. They're your
Absolutely.
biggest support system. And then the rest kind of just falls into place.
It's just hard work,
Yeah.
and dedication to improving yourself all the time. I mean, I know the hours that you put in. You're generally always in the yard when we speak, and it's holding on to the important people around you. Having a business, so at 22, it's unusual. Fair play to you. I mean, I think more young people should be getting into have their own business. I think it's a great thing, but it also does come with a lot of pressure. What's the hardest lesson that you've learned running your own business?
Is my hardest lesson is probably, like, your goal as a writer is to please everybody. But you can't please everybody. And I think that's the hardest pill to swallow, is trying, you yourself, you go out to try and be good and to please everybody, but it's just not going to happen every day.
Well, you're dealing with an animal too, so they have their own mind. And we both know that we can have all the great intentions and have the greatest plan when we walk into the ring. But the horse could have a different plan.
Yeah.
They might be on a different chapter of the book, and it can happen. I love how they've all came alive. They were very quiet before we started. But what motivates you then in business? Like, it is, yes, it's hard to keep everybody happy, but that's the same in life, and you have to look after yourself. And all you can do is show up in your business and in the ring and try your best. Mm-hmm. What motivates you then to keep going on the hard days, running your own business? Like, for example, in the depth of winter, when it is absolutely blowing a gale round us in Drumquin here, what motivates you to keep showing up?
It's thrilled to be better is probably what motivates me. You kind of clutch on to that little dream that you had as a kid to try and fulfill it.
To keep striving?
Yeah, it's probably what gets me through the most of it.
What do you think the industry could do better in relation to mental health and maybe supporting females more?
I think, personally, like, it's such a toxic sport. Like, it consumes you, the competitiveness, and then sometimes you get the online talk, the rumours. It's just, I think if there was just less of that, the whole thing would probably be that little bit easier. Like, I'm sure everybody knows that word of mouth goes a long way in this sport.
Yeah.
I think if people would just give the people starting out that little bit more of a chance.
Just a bit more of a support around everybody. Yeah. It can be, it's an isolating sport, and no matter if you have a team around you, it is just you and the horse, and that team is important. But it's a sport that teaches you, to have resilience. And, like, as you know, I've stepped out of it this year. And on reflection of stepping out, I realise how much the horse has actually taught me. They've taught me about energy, and communication, and they've taught me to be resilient and have a strength. And all those things, like between farming and horses, that's where I've gained the skills to adapt into the rest of my life. But you do have a grit and a resilience that, is really strong. Where did that come from?
It probably came from my dad. Like, being a racehorse trainer it's 7 days a week. Christmas Day,
Boxing Day,
New
Year's Day, every day, yeah.
Every day. It's not a 5 to 9 or anything like that. It's basically 24 hours a day. Like, you don't sleep at night because you think something's going to go wrong down in the yard. But my dad always told me to get up in the morning and just get on with it and try to be the best that you can be. And he taught me a lot. He taught me as well to always be humble. And like, if you do good today, go out tomorrow and try and be better. I think that's where I got the resilience from. And he taught me a lot about strength as well.
There's no ego with your dad.
No.
And I think that's what's needed in the sport, because it's so leveling. You can go out tomorrow and win, and you could go out the next day and be on your backside. Mm-hmm. And that's just how it goes. But having that, being humble, showing up every day, putting the work in, that work ethic, I can see that that's came from your dad. But I know that years ago, you did go through a hard time, and I know this is it's a real personal subject, and you haven't talked about this before, and I'm really grateful that you're going to share some of that with me today. But I know that you had lost your sister, Alison, years ago.
Yes.
And we thought we wanted to talk about this so that we could maybe help other people that are struggling. So I really am grateful that you're willing to share
it. When I was 5, she was 9. She was an amazing rider. She always had the softest hands and the most beautiful natural position on a horse. And she had a feel. She was very, very good as a pony rider. I suppose everything I do today is to try and be like her, even though she was such a young age. You just knew that she was special. But yeah, when I was 5, we had 2 ponies. Mine was called Jasper Carrot, and she had one called Sabrina, and we had rode our 2 ponies, and I was too small to wheel a wheelbarrow, so I was carrying buckets of shavings over to my pony, and we were finished for the evening, and Dad was on the gallops, getting them ready for the next morning for the racehorses to go out and be exercised, and we took a different path that day. We usually go down and meet him on the tractor, but we took a different path that day down the fields, and he was on the gallops, and we came out behind the roller, and she looked at me and she says, "Well, we take a shortcut up the gallop." And me being 5, I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." And she climbed onto the roller, and unfortunately the roller flipped her over and it killed her. I was very young. I didn't really know much about it. I just remember seeing her. I was the last person to see her alive. And that was very tough.
It's such a tragic accident, and to have to try and process that at 5, and I get the magnitude of how hard this is to talk about, because I have watched you grow up. So I've known you since, I don't know, since you were 8 or 9 or something, and you're only getting to a position to be okay to talk about this.
It's always been hard. You always feel like you live in her shadow. Like, we were such a well-known family at that time. And I suppose when it happened, you're in a bubble. Everything, people coming in and out of the house. Anytime you went out, you have people shaking your hand, and you're just in such a whirlwind. And it's not until you reached, well, for me, it was when I reached GCSE level and everybody had like sisters and brothers to turn to. I suppose that's when it hit me.
Yeah.
Or it's like when you have a bad day in the yard and you want to have that person to speak to in the evening, but they're not there anymore. And it was learning to go up to the house in the evening and do my homework on my own and go out to the garden and play on my own like a child. I suppose you could say I had to grow up very quickly. But it taught me a lot. It taught me how to be strong. It taught me to fight. And it taught me that it's going to be okay.
I think, as you say, you said about living in her shadow. Do you think like, she's a driving force behind
She
a lot of
is.
this, you know.
Every day I get up in the morning, it's for her. Every success I have, it's for her. When I went to Spain and I was on my own, mum and dad was at home, she was probably the person that got me through it. And yeah, I had a big support system out there as well. They treated me like family. But I just always, in the evening, I always would have was always like this little star, would have followed me back to the truck at night. And you woke up in the morning and it was pitch dark and that star was still sitting above the truck. You just knew that she was there. Like, she mightn't be here, but she's with me, like.
She's with you, yeah. And it's having, I suppose it's getting, and I'm very proud of you, by the way, for being fit to talk about it, because I know it's hard. I can't begin to imagine what it was like back then, but at such a young age, that was a challenge too, I'm sure, because just your depth of understanding, you know, that she was gone, would have been really, really difficult. But I know for a fact that she'd be really proud of you for the young woman that you've became. And I know a little part of her is with you every time you step into the ring, and that's beautiful. Your story is one of strength, and I don't know if you actually can see the depth of that yourself. You know, having watched you grow up and watched you have to go through that and come out the other side of it as a family. And you did the best you could, because it's very tragic. But I've watched you go through the challenges, and like, you have a quiet determination that you probably don't see sometimes. And for somebody in the sport who's running their own business, you have bravery because you're taking chances. And I think as females, we're a bit risk adverse. You're probably the opposite, because you're flat out wanting to go on the racehorses, and you lean into the risks, like, which is admirable. And I think more people have to do that, and that's what my podcast is all about. It's taking the leaps and making bold moves. What advice would you give to young females out there in relation to life or business?
I would say go and do it. If it's a thought in your head, go and do it. It was always would I, should I, could I, when I was first starting out, but I took the risk. Like, I left school early.
Well, that's what I was going to say. What's the alternative? Like, like, if we stayed at school, what do you think you'd be doing? Or was it just not an option for you?
It just wasn't an option for me. I was always going to do something to do with horses. I probably would have, if I wasn't going to make it as a rider, I would probably do freelance grooming. Just being a part of their lives and watching them, like, when they go in through that ring and they grow. It's incredible. It's an incredible feeling. And even to stand, like, even if you're stood on the ringside and watching it, and it's a feeling it's actually undescribable. But I would say take the risk and go and do it.
I think it is understanding that whatever choice you make, things will work out. And being brave, taking the risk and making the moves, like, what's the worst could happen? You're always going to learn from it.
Exactly. Every day is a learning curve.
So what would be one thing you would want people to take away from this episode? Because we've talked about this for a long time.
It's a really isolating sport. Days can be hard. Pretty sure you can have more bad days than you can have good days. But don't keep them to yourself. There's always everybody wants to listen. and everybody has a story. Like even if it's just a phone call or a message, like send it. People are always going to listen, and there's no point in keeping it a thought in your mind because it buries you, and it's very hard then to overcome that. It might be scary, but once you speak, it's like it's a huge weight lifted off your shoulders, and just don't be scared, or don't have that fear of speaking in case somebody thinks that you're weak, because you're not weak for speaking out. You're actually incredibly strong for speaking out.
Do you think that vulnerability is something that you have had to work on? Because that is what having the courage to speak out is showing vulnerability, and as equestrians, it's not usually the norm.
No. I suppose you feel vulnerable every day. But when you get that feeling that you're that little bit more vulnerable, it's a scary place to be. It's like you're at a crossroads. You don't know whether to turn right or go left or keep going straight on.
Lost.
It's like you're lost. And it's just at that point where you have to make the decision. And that decision leads you to speaking, and it leads you to tell yourself that it's going to be okay, that you're going to get through this, and there's always a light at every tunnel you go through.
Have you had many experiences where it's been really difficult?
I have, yeah. It wasn't until I was about 16 or 17. I always knew this was my passion, this is what I wanted to do, but when I first started out, it was tough. I was trying to get the right horses and trying to get the right clients, and everybody around me was having really good success, and I just wasn't really doing that.
And do you think, that comparison piece is massive. Is that something that Fred is deciding to join us here? Mm-hmm. Is that still something that you would struggle with, the comparison to how everybody else is doing?
I've learned to look at it differently, basically. Everybody's different.
Yeah.
Everybody has different horses at different levels. And I've just learned that everybody's very, very good. But maybe some people get more chances than others. But I've learned to be happy with yourself is one of the most important things.
And what was it like at 16 then, seeing everybody else's successes and feeling like that you weren't maybe achieving what you needed to achieve? What was that like then?
Oh, I felt like I was lost. I didn't know what I wanted to do. It became a huge struggle. Getting up in the morning became a huge struggle. The bad days were incredibly low, and the good days I wasn't getting a kick out of them. And that's when I realised that. That's when I spoke to my mum about it, and she basically told me, she just told me that everybody's different. Everybody has different levels. And that to not get yourself in a rut. Just because today is bad doesn't mean tomorrow's going to be bad. And just take it one day at a time from here on.
And is your mental health something that you've had to work on then?
Hugely. Yeah. Hugely. I've had to learn to deal with being a lonely child.
Well, you had to deal with the loss of your sister, which nobody can prepare you for.
I had to deal with that. I had to do a lot of growing up quite quickly. I had to learn to make decisions on my own. And I had to learn, I knew how to fight for things, but I had to learn to fight for them that little bit harder. I think that was the toughest part.
And do you think, are the horses the thing that help you the most?
They are. When my sister passed, they were the one thing that made you get up out of your bed in the morning. They had to be fed, they had to be mucked out, they had to be took out to be exercised. They were the lifesavers, you may as well say, at that time.
Well, yeah,
and they
'cause
still are.
They don't realise if you're having a bad day. Well, they do, because they're very in tune with your energy, but they still need cared for. And it is knowing that you have to get up for that and showing up for them. And in turn, showing up for them means that you are showing up for yourself, and it is just that little bit of work towards improving yourself. What other things do you do to try and help keep your headspace correct?
It's mainly horses, but I have
suppose
a nice...
when's the time for anything else?
I have a good group of friends, and if I have an odd weekend where there's no shows, we would socialise with each other and stuff. Or I would just spend time with my family. I'd be helping Dad with the sheep or something on the farm, or like at March time, it's always lambing time, and I suppose to have something to look at a little bit different sometimes can charge your batteries too.
It's being out in nature and reconnecting that way. It just taps into that. I can't convince you to go dipping, no?
No, definitely not.
So what's next then? What's the big dreams for the horses?
Well, I suppose this year there's quite high hopes for Pereira. The long-term goal would maybe to get him to Lanaken. And we would love to do either Bullsworth or Hickstead. I've cool Garçon there, so I would maybe look at a few under 25 classes on him. And then I have some lovely, nicer, younger horses, and excited to get going with them and see which road they lead us on.
Well, if this year is anything to go by, and the grit and determination that you have, I'm sure that the next season will be exciting to watch unfold. Is there anything else that you would like to give advice on? I suppose my angle with you was the fact that you're 22, female in the sport, struggle with your mental health, and you're running your own business. What last bit of advice, would you give?
I would say to dream big, work hard, and just get out there and do it. Don't let anything stop you, because there's nothing that will stop you. But yeah, if you have a dream, try and live it, because I just live every day like it's my last day on this earth. And I suppose that's probably got me to where I am today. But yeah, work hard, determination, and you might have to get down and dirty about it sometimes, but it sees you through.
Well, there's no doubt about your level of dedication to not just the sport, but to the business and everything. And I love that it is living each day like it's your last, because you're going after the things. You know, you said you wanted to achieve so many things this year, and you've done that. And it's been incredible to watch. Thank you so much for coming on.
No problem.
It's been long awaited, this interview. And thank you for being so open and vulnerable. I appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Set Your Soul on Fire with me, Sonia. Don't forget to rate, share, and subscribe. Keep listening for even more inspirational ideas to set your soul on fire. Or visit my website now at www.soniamcaleer.co.uk.